This has been a tough one for us. I don't think there's anybody who's on this screen this evening, including the board and including parents who are watching, or anybody on Black Radio News who's watching tonight, who would say they don't want their kids to be back in school full time every single day. None of us, I don't think anyone wants to see that. I think we want our kids in school. And I think we know why we want our kids at school, for all the reasons that we've discussed, for all the reasons that have been discussed. We want our kids in school. Having said that, there's a major barrier for us, and that is still the social distancing requirement. And I use the word requirement that we must adhere to in order to be in school. Now, that requirement is, of course, the 3 feet from student to student, 6 feet from student to staff. That is still a barrier for us. And, sometimes I get questions like, well, why isn't it a barrier for somebody else? Well, I listed a few reasons in the email that I sent all of you as to why it might not be a barrier for others. A lot of school districts in the state have many students who have selected to go the remote learning route, and it's a remote learning software package, perhaps, that removes them from the courses that they're typically taking in school. And so because they're on that pathway, they're out of the building, allowing those students who are remaining to participate in in-person learning because they have the space in which to do so. That's one reason. Another reason is a lot of these school districts may have more than one elementary school, and they have large buildings, older, larger buildings. They have extra space in these older, larger buildings, and they're able to spread out because they may not have large class sizes to begin with, and they're able to accommodate the space issue because they have these older buildings with more rooms. We, as you know, have transitioned to an efficient 2-building campus. And on the one hand, when you're not in a global pandemic, it's great because you've transitioned to a situation where it's extremely efficient. You're not heating rooms unnecessarily. You're not doing those things that a lot of the reasons why we transitioned to get out of a building that was costing us money with maintenance, etc. However, throw in a global pandemic and that causes a problem when you have to socially distance. And that really is the biggest barrier for us right now. So we have done our due diligence, and believe me, we've tormented as we've worked through this to see what could we do, to the point where we were raising anxiety and looking at doing things that simply wouldn't make sense because you were undoing what you have in place, and what you were undoing for the short amount of time that you have left wouldn't work as well as what you're currently doing, if that makes sense. So as a result of that, and asking the question from the CDC and asking the question from members of DOE, are these restrictions going to be lifted? And getting the answer, no, they are going to remain in place for the remainder of this year. We realized that the situation that we're in is the situation that we're in for the remainder of this year, as is many other school districts who have our concerns with space. Having said that, we started a conversation down a different path of what can we do? What can we do? Can we look at those students who are most at risk in this environment? And we looked at different criteria that we would consider. And what could we do for those students? What are some options? It might mean that some are invited to come back to school on a more regular basis. It might mean that we look at our existing resources and reallocate those resources to target some of those students who are truly struggling in this learning environment and give them the extra support. When you continue on into the summer, it could mean looking at some type of summer programming and inviting certain students to participate in that programming. And then last but not least, looking ahead into next year, how do you organize yourself in such a way so that you accelerate learning, not just remediate learning? Because there's a lot of history out there on acceleration versus remediation and the impact that one has over the other. So all of these things that I've just mentioned are all things that the building administrators are prepared to give you, and I won't say a 10,000-foot view, but maybe an 8,000-foot view this evening, because we're still in the works of what does this look like for each of the buildings, but they can give you a summary of what they're thinking right now.